The Egyptians, the Aztecs, the Maya, and the mound builders of North America. All of them built majestic pyramids. Today, we're building pyramids once again. Only this time around, we're not enshrining kings and queens. We're entombing our trash. And ladies and gentlemen, trash ain't cheap. By listening to me today, you stand not only to save money, but to learn ways that you can protect our planet and our precious resources. How? With composting. A simple solution to the many costs, financial and otherwise, that are associated with trash. So, who am I to speak to you today about this? Am I just another tree-loving hippie with my head in the clouds? Well, I do love trees, it's true. But I'm also an experienced composter. I've attended workshops, and I've composted in my backyard for several years. I've also done research on latest scientific materials to satisfy your questions, curiosities, and your doubts about composting, so you can decide if composting is something that you want to do too. So today, I'll start by discussing some disturbing revelations about trash and how we deal with it. Then I'll describe composting and how it can resolve or mitigate these issues. I'll also debunk some common misunderstandings about composting. So, why is it a problem? What's wrong with the way we deal with trash now? Why do we need to compost? Well, it's simple. The way we as a society deal with trash is both wasteful and problematic. It might seem ironic that I should say that the way we deal with trash is wasteful. It is waste, right? But actually, a lot of what we throw away isn't actually waste. It's treasure. It's worth money, literally. Consider recycling. Recycling is worth cash. Before we knew you could recycle aluminum and plastic and glass, we used to throw it out. Today, you can get $45 for 100 pounds of aluminum cans, according to Earthworks Recycling. And the same is true of food and other organic waste. In addition to money, for example, 1 gallon of a type of compost, liquid compost called worm tea, sells for $45 at the Hid Hut Discount Gardening Supplies. You can also use it in your own gardens, so you don't just have to sell it. You can use it yourself. Now, unfortunately, many of us don't compost, and according to some waste diversion experts, organic material accounts for half of what we throw away, according to Prisnitz in 2011. In 2009, Americans generated about 243 million tons of garbage and household trash, according to the EPA. That's 1,755 pounds, or nearly a ton, of trash for every American alive. And dealing with trash isn't cheap. After all, someone has to cart away all the nearly 1 ton of waste that every resident of my complex at PLTC produces every year. The most recent estimate that I could get indicates that the PLTC pays $2,000 a month for our waste removal service. Now, if 1/4 of the residents here at PLTC composted 1/4 of our trash, and that last is a conservative estimate of what's actually compostable, we could reduce our bill with allied waste by 6%. 6%, that's $125 a month, or $1,500 a year. It adds up. And again, this is only a conservative estimate. And besides being financially careless with our food waste, putting it in landfills we use to, quote, dispose of it, poses a number of other problems. First, by burying mineral and nutrient-rich foods in a landfill, we remove them from the food chain. We pull them right out. This depletes the quality and nutritional value of the food that we can continue to produce, according to Granstead and Kellenberg. And this is something we could avoid if we use compost in our own gardens, especially if we had our own community garden. Also, as it decomposes, organic waste in landfills produces methane gas, releasing about 10 million metric tons of methane per year in the United States alone, according to Parcell. And while carbon dioxide gets all the bad press as a greenhouse gas, it turns out that methane is 21 times more potent, according to Whalen. Methane generated by landfill accounts for roughly 10% of worldwide methane emissions, according to Whalen, Wubbles, and Hayhoe. That's right, you do not have to drive a car to add to the greenhouse effect. You do it every time you throw food away. But besides what creeps out of landfills, we're also running out of space to put trash in. Part of this has to do with the fact that landfills take up a lot of land. One site in North Carolina takes up 230 acres. However, they only use 70 acres for its one functional landfill. That's a lot of land. Now, just that 70 acres, let's look at that. 70 acres is enough room for every single team, that's 32 teams in the NFL, to play a game of football at the same time. But wait, there's more. That leaves 50 acres. What does that mean? Enough for 50 professional soccer teams to go head-to-head. If you ask me, playing fields or parks is a much better way to use all that space. And of course, who can ignore the fact that landfills, well, they stink. This is a sentiment immortalized in one of my favorite films, Star Wars. "What a horrible smell you've discovered," says Han Solo. And the stench of rotting trash wasn't their only problem inside that trash compactor. They also had to contend with one very large, one very disgusting, one-eyed trash compactor rodent. Now, whether the landfill is on the Death Star or right next door, rodent and odor problems plague all landfills. However, most people think compost is just as smelly and inviting to pests as is household trash. But done right, it's not the case. Compost can both smell good and offer nothing for rodents to eat. So next, let's take a more close look at composting. Besides saving us money, composting has simple solutions to the various problems that I've discussed. Let's go through them one by one. First, by composting our organic waste, we can eliminate this half of the trash we send to the landfill. Not only will it save precious land, it can be used for better things. Diverting this waste will greatly reduce methane emissions. And, as I mentioned earlier, what we call organic waste isn't really waste at all. When we compost scraps of organic material, we create two kinds of rich and valuable plant food from it. One of them is black gold. That's the soil created by the hot or dry composting process because it's so rich and beneficial to plant life. The soil created by vermicomposting, or composting with red worms, creates even richer black gold. So rich it contains 5 times more nitrogen and 7 times more phosphorus. Those are two of the major fertile ingredients in soil that is found in general topsoil, and that's according to Bogner. Now, worm castings, which I mentioned earlier, come from vermicomposting. They can be used to create a tea known as liquid gold that's full of beneficial aerobic bacteria and fungi that help plants thrive and actually work as a natural pesticide. Composting also helps prevent the degradation and depletion of our soil. How's that? Well, organic farming, which relies heavily on composting, results in more fertile soil and crops with higher quality protein when compared to conventional farming methods that use chemical fertilizers, and that's according to Grenstead and Kellenberg. Also, food grown in compost-rich soil has higher vitamin and mineral content than food grown conventionally. That's according to the Center for Ecological Technology in 2011. Now, I told you earlier that compost doesn't have to smell or attract vermin. And you were thinking, yeah, right! So let me explain. The key is keeping all your meat or dairy products out of your compost. According to Colleen Vanderlinden, organic gardener and About.com contributor, a few of the things we can do to prevent rodents are the following. Bury your food scraps under more established compost, cover them with lawn or other garden clippings, keep the compost wet, and turn it regularly. And of course, don't forget, composting is Mother Nature's way of recycling nutrients back into the food chain. And I'm guessing you probably like the way that forests smell, the way the prairies smell, or even jungles smell. At least you like them more than the bottom of your trash can. But isn't Mother Nature's way of composting incredibly slow? Yes, it is. It takes a really long time. But we've got big brains, and we use them to develop the composting process. So let's look at those a little more closely. Hot composting, which is how I started, involves mixing a balance of kitchen waste and garden waste in a bin like this one you see here. Bugs, as well as healthy bacteria and fungi, break it down into soil. And by manually turning the mixture regularly, we can accelerate this natural process. And rather than taking many years, we can turn a bin full of organic waste into rich compost in as little as 3 months. And that's again according to Bogner from his backyard composting brochure. Now it's called hot composting because when it's managed correctly, it heats up to 120 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That kills all the bugs you don't want and leaves the ones that you do. It's not technically the bugs, it's the bacteria and fungi. Now the other type of composting that's even more efficient is vermicomposting. Vermicomposting is similar to hot, except rather than using heat to accelerate the process, we use red worms and a lot of water to accelerate it. It's so much faster because red worms can eat up to half of their weight in food a day. And in one compost bin, there can be thousands of these worms. And although you may have heard that composting is difficult, it's really not. As long as you follow some basic guidelines, anybody can make compost. I mean, I can do it, and the only plant that I can keep alive is a cactus. Seriously, trust me. But this is just a basic overview. If you want to learn more, I've got some detailed brochures for you to look at after my presentation if you like. Now, can you picture what a future with less trash and fewer landfills might be like? Imagine not needing to use our land to create more landfills like this. Or having to pump perfumes into the air to disguise the smell like they do in Beijing, China. You've probably experienced that yourself firsthand when you go into someone's bathroom. It doesn't work too well, does it? Rather than looking at an enormous landfill, you could look at one half the size. And taking up some of the space right next door might be a composting facility like the ones you see here. Rather than plugging your nose as you drive by, you'll probably enjoy the smell of the rich, raw soil, kind of like what you used to dig in as a kid. Or maybe you still do if you're a gardener. And when you look out at the plants in your garden, the vegetables growing there, or the flower beds in your apartment complex, they'll all be bursting with life and flavor because they'll have been grown with compost. Now that you know a simple and rewarding solution to the problems posed by the conventional way we deal with trash, what can you do? Basic. Compost. With a bit of planning, you or we could build our own community composting right here, which would be ideal if we decide to build a composting garden, or a community garden, excuse me. And even if we don't set up garden plots, composting will still save the complex money and will be helping the planet and future generations. Until then, if you want to compost on your own, what can you do? There's a lot of resources out there, including these books, Let It Rot, Easy Composters You Can Build, the Rodell Book of Composting, and Start with the Soil. Or you can check out these very helpful websites, Composting 101, wormcompostingblog.com, or learn how to build a compost bin at Missouri's site, or go to salanacenter.org, where you can learn about their workshops. I went to one of their workshops myself. Or you can just talk to people in the community. Angelo Vitale is one of my friends. He works the Hillcrest Farmers Market every other Sunday. He'd be happy to talk to you. He's a friend of mine because he was happy to talk to me about composting. Or just about anybody selling compost materials at any of your local farmers market. People who do compost, like myself. We love it. We're amazed at turning trash into soil. So we love to spread the word. So in sum, we can help protect the world's resources, help gardens and farms thrive, provide great soil to local gardeners, including everybody here, and save the residents here at our community cold, hard cash. All this by going back to Mother Nature's original secret recipe.